What up, everyone? It's Led Black of the Uptown Collective, and this is the Uptown Voices podcast. Me and my brother Octavio Blanco. This is episode 5, and this is a very, very special episode. This is the Coogan's episode in loving memory of Peter Walsh. We have none other than Dave Hunt with us. Tess McDay could not make it with us, so Dave, brother, how you doing, man? It's been a while.
Doing great. I'm doing great. Actually, I saw you. I didn't get a chance to say hello to you, but I did see you at one of the community events just a while ago.
Gotcha, brother. And then how are you dealing with the loss, right? Like it's been about 2 months now. Peter was so important to us. I know to you. You guys are probably like brothers, basically.
We stopped correcting people. Many people, many of our customers assumed that we were brothers. So many years ago, we stopped correcting them, and they, oh, how's your brother doing? He's doing great, you know. Uh, but I still feel the loss tremendously. Um, Peter and I, Coogan's has been closed now for 5 years, a little bit more than 5 years. But Peter and I have been in constant communication, and he had a very uh, laboring effort to fight his cancer. But he would be at home. We'd be what he was a Yankee fan. I'm a Mets fan. We'd be texting back and forth about that, and I still catch myself sometimes wanting to share something and then realizing, of course, that uh, the finality of someone passing, someone who you communicated with all the time. Uh, you teased, you joked, you busted balls, you did everything back and forth. And so there's a big void in my personal life that Peter has passed.
Welcome to Uptown Voices. From Harlem to the Heights to the northern tip of Inwood, we're here to celebrate our people and together seek solutions for the difficult issues we're all confronting as neighbors. Regardless of what hood you represent, we share the same goal, creating the best community we can, somewhere to enjoy, where we can build our lives and raise our children. We want to thank 181 Cabrini, located on the corner of 181st Street and Cabrini Boulevard, for its generous support for this podcast. It's your neighborhood bistro just steps away from the North Walk of the GWB. Stay tuned for a discount code that you can mention to your bartender or server the next time you visit the restaurant. We also need financial contributions from listeners like you to produce, improve, and expand our content. To contribute, please scan the QR code on the screen or visit www.livingamericana.com. That's living without a G.
Peter was more than just the proprietor, one of the proprietors. He was like the personification of Coogan's, right? In a sense, like that Coogan spirit was Peter, you know what I mean? And he's missed. And I think Coogan's is missed too, right? It's
His
almost
energy
interesting.
level was outrageous.
He had more energy than anybody. There was
Yes.
no one that had more energy than him. But what's interesting, it's almost 5 years to the day of Coogan's closing. You know what I mean? Because Coogan's closing April 2020, right? He died.
He deserved more free time because at least the last 18 months, it was all taken up with doctors and going for tests and treatments and everything like that. He deserved more than that.
He definitely did. He was such an important part. So were you, right? Like when you think about Coogan's is more than a bar, right? It was a pillar, a beacon, like an oasis in our community. So let's go back to the beginning. Like why Washington Heights in 1985?
Okay, well, first of all,
crack
after we were
epidemic.
there for a while, people assumed that we were part of the Irish that never left Washington Heights.
Right.
That wasn't true. That wasn't true. I was born and raised in Inwood, but then I moved to Greenwich Village, and I lived in Greenwich Village for 20 years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I lived on Perry Street, and I worked in a bar in Greenwich Village called Jimmy Day's. But near the end of my time at Jimmy Day's, I had gotten married. I had some children. I started my family. And one of the women who worked with us, her husband, who was a friend of mine also, but her husband opened Coogan's in 1985. And it was a difficult thing putting things together. And he had to rearrange partnerships and beg, borrow, steal the money to get it together because that was a major endeavor 1983, 1984, when he was putting that together, that was a major, major renovation in Washington Heights. So anyway, she said to me, she says, listen, his name was Sean, an Irish guy, to an Irish American guy, Sean Cannon. And she said, listen, he needs help up there. I suggested that he talk to you about being a manager. So I went up in 1987, 2 years after they had opened, and I took over the managership. And then there was a crisis within the owners, and Sean got pushed out. I got pushed out because I was Sean's guy. And then it took us about 18 months for myself and Peter to get the money together to buy out the guys who had forced myself and Sean out. So it took us about 18 months to get it back together again. So in June of 1990, myself, Peter, Sean became the owners of Coogan's. But it was the guys who pushed Sean out got themselves into financial trouble. So we were able to take over, and we ran a very successful business there.
And why? Why did you fight for it so hard? Like, what did this mean to you?
Well, remember, I was a manager, so I knew all the potentials. I knew all the potential that was there. And the guys who forced Sean and myself out, Irish guys, Irish American guys, but they were a little scared of the neighborhood. They wanted to run their business from 10 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, close up shop. And I'm like, are you kidding? This is a packed neighborhood. Right?
Right.
So we redirected our efforts, and we made it not hospital-based, but community-based. Now, you know yourselves that so many people who live in Washington Heights also work in the hospital. It's an easy thing. And when Peter and I got involved, we definitely reached out and brought in we made the tent bigger. Let's put it that way. We made the tent bigger. And, we right from the beginning, we didn't know this when we opened Coogan's, but it became a big cop hangout, because after they were finished their shifts, they could all double. Remember, in those days, you double park, triple park, you did whatever you did in Washington Heights. And then at the end, some could go to Rockland County, some could go to Bronx, some could go to Yonkers, out to Long Island. It was tremendously convenient for that. So we had that going. We had the neighborhood going. We had the hospital going. Peter and I began catering, and we did a lot of catering with Columbia University. We're on the health science campus of Columbia University, and business-wise, it was a good business plan.
So I wanted, can I jump in for a second? Because I wanted to just ask you a quick thing, Dave, because being that I lived in Inwood for almost 20 years, I guess it must have been like 10, 15, 20 years. I can't remember exactly. I live in Washington Heights, but I knew a lot of the Inwood Irish guys. We hung out at the Piper's Kilt, and I loved them. I really loved them. They were so great. And they're some of my best friends to this date. But sometimes folks from one community kind of stick with their community, and other folks from another community kind of stick with their community. And you guys didn't have that frame of mind. I do feel that you guys had a very business mind, so you figured we should open this up to the community. But then I do wonder, once you did that, once you opened the tent and made the tent bigger, what did you learn about community? What was it that sort of like happened after you made that decision?
Well, first of all, let me say, we were no saints. Believe me, if it did not work business-wise, we would have changed the plan, right? But it worked business-wise. Holy shit, these people actually like each other. Now, Jim Dwyer, who lived in Washington Heights on 190th Street, and who wrote for the New York Times, and I love this quote. He said that Coogan's was the most successfully, that's the key word, successfully integrated bar in America. We didn't have any problems there. There was no this group against that group.
And it's funny because you quote Dyer, rest in peace, because he also made a point about how even among other bars, he would feel, even though he was Irish American himself, he would feel kind of like, hey, this is not my crowd. They don't know who I am.
100.
But at Coogan's, it doesn't matter who you were, you felt welcome, right? Like it doesn't matter. Like it was one of those places.
Do you remember when there was a bar on 215th Street in Broadway called Bakerfield?
Yeah.
Okay. So this would be in the early 90s, I guess. And Thursday night used to be our biggest night. And we would get filled up, and they had dancing. And we would get filled up, and around 11:30, 12 o'clock, people would come in. They'd have a couple of rounds of drinks at Coogan's. Then they'd get cabs, and they'd go up to Bakerfield. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, there was always a fight. There was always a fight. Pretty much they had an Anglo staff, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, people of color. And I went to the owner, who was a friend of mine, a nice guy, and I said, it has to be coming from the inside. Your staff has to be giving off an attitude when people walk in the door to put them on edge. And I got to tell you, we had a lot of Irish guys who worked for us, but they were guys like, hey, how you doing? Good looking. What can I get for you? You know, it was that type of thing. And we weeded out the people who had any kind of racial attitudes. If you had a racial attitude, because it just didn't work for us, and it was not good business. It was not good business.
But it's funny, you had to make a decision, right? And you had to steer things in that direction, right? Which it shows a lot what you guys were doing, right? You didn't allow it to fester.
We didn't allow it to fester, and we made sure that our staff was very diverse.
And you leaned into it. I mean, I loved one of the best things that I love about this neighborhood, and I've loved it since I arrived here in 1998. So I'm a new guy compared to Dave and compared to Led. But one of the things that I love about the neighborhood that is the Shamrocks and Salsa 5K, which I think was rebranded afterwards.
That was all Peter.
That was so great. Peter. That was so leaning into it.
That because I was not really involved in it. Certainly I supported it, but it was Peter's brainchild. He put it together, Salsa, Blues, and Shamrocks, and it was fabulous for the neighborhood. By the way, you're absolutely right. What happened? I'll tell you very, very quickly. So I forget what year it was. It was 2010 or something like that. We used to give the city of New York a $5,000 honorarium, right? Now, they would close down streets. They'd have 30 cops on overtime. They did great, and we would give them $5,000. The Thursday before Salsa, Blues, and Shamrocks race, which was Sunday, the first Sunday in March, the Thursday before, we get notified by the city that the honorarium this year has to be $60,000. So they gave us no time, and this year it's $60,000 you got to give us to cover the police.
Wow.
So we went to Charlie Rangel, again, rest in peace, Charlie Rangel. Charlie went to the police commissioner and said, this is ridiculous. You can't do this. So they said, okay, this year we'll do it for $5,000. But after that, next year, tell them to plan, it's going to be $60,000. Well, that was too much for us. So that's when New York Roadrunners, good friends of ours, took it over. But they did rename it. They renamed it the Washington Heights 5K. But last year they brought it back to the Salsa, Blues, and Shamrocks.
Oh, nice.
That is awesome.
That's
awesome.
awesome.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. Oh.
So
when I'm sorry,
go ahead.
When did this? Because when did it become? Me and Tommy just like so happy that you're here that we're like fighting to ask you questions.
I know.
But when did it become Uptown City Hall? Right? When did it become the place where the politicians started going? Like, when was that?
Okay. So remember, I mentioned this guy Sean, who was the guy who put it all together. And in the beginning, while it was under construction, he had to buy certain partners out, bring in other part. It was complicated. But one day, one of the workers comes and says, there's a man in a suit that wants to talk to you. So Sean goes to the door, and there's this very dapper, tall, thin man dressed to the nines, And he says, "Tell me what you're doing in here. This is my district. I'm the local politician here." But it was Denny Farrell, right?
Danny Farrell, right?
So Sean told him what he was doing, and then he said, "Well, I wish you best of luck, and please keep me informed." He says, "Because I have some people who might need jobs, and I'd like to get them placed here." So Sean said, "Okay, I'll do that," right? And then when they left, he didn't know where this was coming. What did that mean? Get people jobs? No-show jobs? What do you know? Sean had no idea. He didn't know where it was going with it. But of course, Denny turned out to be our greatest friend, our greatest. Denny was almost every Saturday. He held meetings with other politicians in there. And if you wanted to get something done through the Democratic Party in New York City, you had to go meet Denny at Coogan's on Saturday.
Wow.
So many people picked up on this. And in between his meetings, they'd sneak over and say, "Oh, Mr. Farrell, I'm having a problem with 531 West," and he'd write it down. We solved a lot of problems through Denny. He worked very, very hard for his constituents in northern Manhattan. He worked very, very hard.
That was his office. That's one of his offices, I guess.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And we became great personal friends,
It's funny because I was watching again the movie, and there's a part where I guess Rudy Giuliani was there, and Peter kind of threw him a shot about the Republican, which I thought was just brilliant.
Well, the shot that he did was, and I don't think most people picked up on this.
Yeah.
Rudy said, "I'm probably the only Republican who's been here," and Peter made a sly reference to the Irish Republican Army.
Right. I thought it was brilliant. I thought that was brilliant.
That is great. And being that you're a manager and being that you have had so much experience in Washington Heights and Uptown, being that you're from Inwood, I'm sure people come to you and ask you for your advice. What's the biggest or the best piece of advice that you think you could give to somebody? Because there are folks that are trying to open their bars, and a lot of them, and a lot of bars and restaurants, they don't last very long. And what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give a new bar owner, particularly whether in Inwood, Washington Heights area, and Harlem? Like, what would they need to do?
I'll give you an industry statistic. For every new customer to walk in the door, businesses are willing to spend, say, $7, but only $1 to keep a regular customer. They spend so much time trying to get new business in the door, they forget they already have people in there that they need to keep happy and they need to be thankful for, and make them feel at home so that they can continue coming back. New is nice, but tried and true, steady customers are a wonderful, wonderful thing.
And I hate to let's go back a little bit, because one of the things that I think is important, that Coogan's was one of the few bars in Washington Heights that you could go to that wasn't a drug dealer bar in my part of the Washington Heights, right? Like, you know what I mean? It was like, we didn't have bars like that. You know what I mean? It was bars where stuff was happening. If you couldn't go in there if you didn't know anybody, and if you went in there, you were, you went at your own peril. You know what I mean? So that's what I think makes Coogan so special, that it was a real place and it was so welcoming. And I just want to thank you for that, Dave. Like I feel like I didn't get to I told Peter a few times, but I don't know if people realize how important you guys were to this neighborhood, right? And I'll say this: the pandemic didn't hit me until I saw Coogan's was closing. Right? That's when oh my God, this is real.
We just weren't set up to, remember there was a time where it was like only to-go orders and stuff like that. We just weren't set up to do that business. But going back to the drug dealer thing, there was a guy in the neighborhood, a very, very nice guy. I kind of liked him. He was a nice, polished guy. I remember his name very well, but I'll hold that name back. Anyway, he came in. This guy was a polished, nice gentleman. And he came in with these three bozos. who got up every 5 minutes and run to the bathroom, come back, sit down, blah, 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 run to the bathroom. So when all three of them were away from the table and just this man who I had somewhat of a relationship with, I went over and I said, what are you bringing these guys in here for? What are you, out of your mind? And he very calmly looked at me and he said, I apologize. He says, but I'm not used to people speaking to me that way. He was very polished, this guy. But he got them up, got them out, and that was the end of it. He wound up doing 25 to life, and he died in prison. This nice, polished guy from 170-something Street, who I knew on one level, but it turns out he was a major mover. And eventually he got caught. He did 25 to life, and he died in prison.
Wow. I mean, that era was something else. And if I may, I want to talk about the riots, right? I was a little kid when the riots happened, and I remember going out there taking pictures and being blown away because I had never seen anything like that. What was the Cougans take? Because you guys were in the heart of those riots. Many people don't even know about those riots, by the way. So tell us what happened with you guys there.
Okay, so that was the 4th of July weekend.
1992.
And we stayed open because we sort of had to be there anyway. And we felt we had enough. We were wrong about this, but we thought we would have enough presence to be able to let whatever crowds came pass by. As it turns out, there were so many 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds on the street who wouldn't know us from a hole in the wall. We were lucky that some of the older people told them to keep moving. So they would march from 163rd Street up to the 34th precinct, and they would just swing by Cougans. And the first night they lit garbage cans on fire and everything like that. And then when they, I forget the sequence, but maybe the second or third night, they brought in like 3,000 cops from all over the city. They brought in busloads of cops. Well, those cops needed to go to the bathroom. They needed to eat on their break. We were open for business. We did that. And we had good relationships with some of the Dominican leadership. We had good relationships with some of the police leaders. And I know at one point, I forget how it all turned out, but the chief of police of the 34th precinct was in at one point to eat on his meal break, because a lot of the businesses were closed, boarded up. And one of the Dominican leaders was in. And Peter introduced both of them and said, you two guys are good guys. You should know each other. And they sat down, and I think that played some sort of a way of easing some of the tensions. But it definitely put two guys together who,
right,
if they weren't brought together, are going to be enemies.
Right.
But and very respectful for years after that, for years and years after that, very respectful to each other. So,
yeah, I feel like the riots were a turning point in the neighborhood. I think after that, I think the community and the police started having a different understanding, and it's amazing that Coogan's played a part in that. Well,
I have to tell you, we did not tolerate nonsense from the police either.
What do you mean by that?
If someone started talking nonsense, we'd pull them aside and say, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And they felt uneasy being that stereotypical blockhead type of cop. We actually, I'm going to tell you, we actually dealt with the cream of the crop of the New York City Police Department. These guys who hung out at Coogan's on a regular basis were good guys. Good guys. And interested in solving problems.
Traditionally in New York, cops have been Irish. And I wonder if
you know what the biggest ethnic group in New York City Police Department is?
Dominicans.
Yes.
Well, now, right? But for forever.
30 years ago, I told Adriano Espaillat, I said, learn from the Irish. Get badges and guns. Then you'll have power.
Yeah.
Smart
But
move.
but
Well, that was the way the Irish took over New York City in the 50s.
but I also think it's interesting that as a bar man, as a bar manager, as bartenders, that you didn't take any guff from anybody, but also that you got the respect from those cops to listen to you when you told them, "Hey, what the hell are you doing talking like that or being that way?" And I just wonder, like, if there's like a tradition, a bar tradition, and a respect for the bar as a public house, right? And I wonder if that comes into play at all.
I think maybe a little bit with the younger cops, but the older generation of cops did not view bars that way. The older generation of cops in the 50s and the 60s felt that there was always something that they could catch you on. So, what are you giving me this bill for? We never that in the trade that's called being on scholarship, and we didn't have anybody on scholarship. We didn't have anybody on scholarship. You paid your way. And I also told one of the police uh, inspectors who repeated this numerous times without mentioning me, but repeated it many, many times, that it's the neighborhood saloon keeper who first knows about corrupt cops. Because corrupt cops, I don't care if they're taking a lot of money, they don't want to spend it. They want to, get their drinks on the house for free. And we had no scholarships going.
Wow, that's interesting. I think that's wise of that cop to recognize that the saloon keeper knows.
Right off the bat, we know who was sketchy. Let's call it sketchy.
And I found it funny that Coogan's was kind of this global place in the sense that you had like all the Dominican leadership on the island, not Dominican American, come to Coogan's, right? Which is amazing. Like, how did that come about?
Let me see. So Stanley Michaels used to be the council person in
Right.
Washington Heights. So he calls me up one day and he says, listen, he says, Leonel Fernandez is going to be at City Hall. There's going to be a receiving line. Come on down. You'll get a chance to meet the president of the Dominican Republic. So I go down, and like a complete idiot, when I meet him, I'm shaking his hand and I'm trying to explain. I'm talking very, very slowly. I'm saying, Mr. President, I own Coogan's restaurant. And I'm talking very. He goes, yeah, right there on the corner on 169th Street. I did not know that he had been a teacher in Northern Manhattan.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
And
That's
then it became, when they were campaigning in Washington Heights for it became a stop. It became a stop. They'd all come in and we'd fuss over them and everything. And we enjoyed that role.
and I've always said there's always been this kind of affinity between Irish people and Latinos in the ways that we're so similar, right? It's the libations, the family, the fun, and I felt like Coogan's never felt alien, right? It never felt like, I don't know, I don't want to go there. Like, it always felt like home. So that's just a thing I thought about.
That's a terrific thing to say. And I got to tell, I mean, the diversity of Coogans, I mean, like I said, we had a wonderful, wonderful collection of law enforcement people who, over the years, became very, very friendly with the regular customers in Coogan's and helped them out. We had, people had certain problems, didn't know how to handle it. They would wind up talking to one of the detectives at the bar, and the detective would say, call this person, try this, do this. One man, a Puerto Rican man, a lovely, lovely man, and he came to me one night. He was in tears. He lived in a building where the lobby was taken over by street drug dealers, and he would call the police, but they had spotters out on the street. So when the cars came down, they'd be all gone. The cops would go in with them. So he's in tears because now his wife, they raised their family there. Now the wife wants to move out of the neighborhood. and he wants to stay where he is, but he has to solve this problem, and he can't solve the problem. So I went to a sergeant in the 33rd precinct, who was a friend, a good friend, told him the situation. He says, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it. So what he did is at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he took his team up and they went to sleep. They took a nap up on the 5th floor, on the landing between the 5th floor and the roof. And then at 7 o'clock, they didn't come down the street. They came down the stairwells. And they rounded up some people, I guess, scared them, whatever, and it opened up that building.
That's amazing.
You know, the
It's a
people
great
found
story.
something else.
I swear there's so many movies that should be made about Cougans. I mean, I want the story. I want the story of how you won it back from those guys to be made into a movie. I think that would be really interesting. Led, I think now it's time to take a short pause so that we can pay some of the bills, right?
You want to tell them a little about donations and how they could help the show?
Absolutely. We can't do this without contributions from our viewers. You're going to see a QR code of the screen here, which you can scan, and that's going to take you to a contribution site where you can make a contribution towards Uptown Voices. It's going to be helpful for us to be able to elevate our production. We have dreams and aspirations of doing live shows. We have dreams and aspirations of being on location at our various cultural institutions, and we can't do that without contributions from viewers and listeners like you. And we also can't do that without our sponsors. And this pilot season, this first episode of our pilot season, we are lucky to have a great sponsor, 181 Cabrini. It's our neighborhood bistro. Both Led and I are just steps away from 181 Cabrini, and we love it. 181 Cabrini is located right there on that corner of 181 and Cabrini, just steps away.
181 and Cabrini.
Just steps away from the bridge. So yeah, I love it. Led, you and I were there the other night.
Yeah, and we also met there for the first time. You and I, the first time we met, we had like lunch there, and it's my local bar now. Like, since you and I both live like right around. It's my local bar. I spend a lot of times there. James Lee, the owner, is just an incredible restaurateur. Right, I think he's a great guy. He's super funny, but like the food is on point. Please hit up 181 Cabrini. It is really one of my favorite spots. But yeah. 181 Cabrini. The sangria is amazing. Everything in there. Oh, and you have to try the coconut bread pudding. They got coconut, they got chocolate, and now they got banana, but the coconut, outstanding. So like I said, it's the attention to detail for me. It's a great neighborhood joint. Thank you to James and 181 Cabrini for sponsoring this episode. And, you know, if you want to sponsor, holla at my boy. You know what I mean? Let's make it happen. You know what I mean?
I just want to say one thing. We're going to have a redemption code at the end of this episode, which you can bring to 181 Cabrini for a special treat.
But yeah, without further ado, though, let's get to it. Let's do it.
Can I ask you, being that you're from Inwood, and I love Inwood. I like this. So I've lived all over the world. I was born in Mexico City, and I lived in Italy for 5 years, and I lived in Spain for 4 years, and then I moved back to Italy, and then my family came down to Maryland, and I went to high school in Maryland, and I went to college at Syracuse. But the place where I lived the longest has been Uptown, Inwood and Washington Heights. So I really feel like I'm part of the neighborhood. I feel like, as a person who really has had very thin roots, I've been able to like have thicker roots planted in Inwood. Now you moved all the way down to Perry Street, right? And then you were called back up to, the old stomping grounds, sort of, Washington Heights, and that wasn't quite Inwood, but you said that you weren't afraid of the neighborhood. But was there also a bit of nostalgia, like that you missed it? Because I feel like it's imprinted on us,
Yes, and remember, we talked before about how many people in the community, in the neighborhood, also worked in the hospital. Well, there were many people who had sort of grown up around my time in Inwood who were working in the hospital. And they'd walk in and they'd take a look at me and they'd, are you from Cooper Street? That type of thing. And there was a woman where at the time when you went to Presbyterian Hospital for your annual checkup or whatever, you'd have to get your blood pressure taken, and then you go back and sit in the waiting room. Then you'd have to get your chest x-ray. You go back, sit in the waiting room. Then you'd have to get your blood work. You'd go back, sit. So the woman at the counter, who was sort of the quarterback of this thing, was a woman from Isham Street, which was right up the block from me, right? So there was no waiting for me. I'd go in and, go over here. I'd sit down and they'd call me into another room, and then they'd call me into it. Yeah, go back to work,
Well,
So,
I always, and I want to talk a little bit about Inwood because I love Inwood. I always felt like Inwood was like a small town, actually.
very much so. It was small town America.
It was incredible because Inwood, and I was there after many Irish people left, and I was there when there was a strong, Dominican presence. But even then, it also felt like a small town. I feel like we're down the hill, and so it's sort of isolated Inwood from the rest of Manhattan, and also we've got the river, above us, so that kind of isolates us too. And I just felt so much of like a community feeling there, and I wonder, Led, what do you think? Do you think Inwood is holding on to its like community feel? What do you think?
Well, I just want to say that I think what's interesting about what you're saying to me and Dave, like Inwood had a real bar culture, right? Like it was a lot of bars in Inwood.
Well, Ginwood.
Ginwood, right? Yeah. And listen, I'm gonna open a restaurant. I'm gonna call it Ginwood. I love that idea.
That's a great name, actually.
But the fact that there was so many bars, Did that have an influence on you as a proprietor, as a owner of a bar?
Certainly had an influence on me when I was a young man. I'll tell you that. And one of the original funders of Coogan's. Now, my recollection is that Coogan's was put together for about $600,000, which would be the equivalent today of about $2 million. So it was a lot of money. And one of the people who put money into as collateral, to build this restaurant was the guy who owned the Inwood Lounge, which was on Sherman Avenue between 204th Street and Academy Street. And the Inwood Lounge in the heyday in the 60s, people from all 5 boroughs came to it. It was a big dance hall and, reasonably priced drinks. I don't think they charged admission, but it would be packed Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and a huge Sunday afternoon event. So there was an Inwood influence in the history of cooking.
And I want to say also, so then like let's fast forward, right? Coogan's is the institution. It is Uptown City Hall. It's all these things to all these people. Like we didn't even talk about the running community, how much that meant to. So can you take us back to 2018 when the whole thing with New York Presbyterian starts percolating? Like, how did you feel? What happened? And tell us more about that.
Okay. First of all, let me make the distinction clear between New York Presbyterian doctors, nurses, staff, the security people. We loved them, and they were great. Their real estate department sucks. They're awful. They're awful. Right. So over the course of years, maybe 5 years, maybe 2013, we said, listen, we have 5 years left on the lease. Let's work something out now so we know we have a future here. And they were just unreasonable. They wouldn't return phone calls. You'd finally say, oh, that person isn't in charge of that anymore. You have to speak to this person. You set up an appointment to meet with them. And I remember one guy who said, listen, he says, I know this is going to take more than 2 months to put a deal together. He says, I'm going to be gone in 2 months. He says, so I'm not particularly interested in, wait till somebody else comes in. Well, one way or the other, it was like talking to a brick wall. And Peter eventually said, we're just spinning our wheels here. They're not negotiating. They say, this is it. I think they wanted $62,000 a month in rent, which is just not, it's just not doable.
Yeah.
And As it turns out, Tess dropped out. She says, I'm not spending any more time. It is what it is. They want us out. The lease is up in May of 2018. So I continued on, and myself and Peter's brother Vincent had our last meeting in person down at their offices on East 61st Street. That tells you something right there, that you have to get down to East 61st Street to talk about a saloon in Washington Heights, right? And there was just no budging. No, this is what we want. This is what we want. So we said, okay. And I came back and I told, this is, I think, like December 10th or 9th. And I said to Tess and Peter, I said, we're done. We're out of here May 31st, 2018. So Tess, we had a very, very busy holiday season with parties and stuff like that. Then Tess wanted to go home to her family in England. And then together, myself, Peter, and Tess would get the staff together and tell them in early January that when the lease was up, that was it. So we did that, and we brought some of the staff together, and we told them that here is the big fear in a small business like that. If they jump ship, if they leave before your last 4 or 5 months, what are you working with? So we said, listen, if you have to leave, we totally understand that. You got to do what's best for you. But if you do stay with us, we guarantee you, between myself, Peter, and Tess, the contacts that we have in the New York restaurant industry, we will place you in good, equally paying jobs. Nobody left. We got the kitchen together, which is all Dominican. They all stayed. Every single one of them said, no, we'll stay. As Yesenia Reyes said, we're going to stay with you till the wheels come off, which was going to be May. And then, I think it's a Tuesday night, my son calls me from Baltimore. He goes, what's going on? I said, what do you mean? He goes, people are calling me, his friends, right? Because the New York Times runs an article saying that we're closing. Well, Peter and I, at this point in our lives, we read the hard copy paper. We didn't get the internet edition, right? So my son's friends, they were all on, getting things on the internet. So we had to get the staff together, explain what was going on, and then all hell broke loose. All hell broke loose. I remember Charlie Rangel called up the president of Presbyterian Hospital and said, are you out of your damn mind? Are you out of your damn mind? And another female politician who's no longer in political life, she called up her counterpart, the vice president of community relations or whatever, and said, you have kicked a beehive here. You've kicked over a beehive. And then Lin-Manuel tweeted out that this was a horrible thing. And all of a sudden, now they're willing to talk. But the guys that we dealt with, we didn't deal with them at that point. We dealt with the head guys. The first time I ever met him, I didn't know his name, but he makes over $1 million a year to run the real estate department, and this is the first time I'm meeting him. He came over and he said, what do you want? How do you, let's make a deal. And he suggested something. I forget what the numbers were, but I said, that's not gonna do it. He says, well, tell me what will do it. And I said, we can take 3% a year increase for the next 3 years, and then we'll all be of retirement age. That'll be fine. He says, done. He goes back. He has the lawyers draw up the papers. Then he had to come back in to get the papers signed by myself, Peter, and Tess, and walk through the Mirandas. Gail Brule was there. Adriano Espaillat was there. Carmen De La Rosa was there. All the local politicians and the Miranda family were there celebrating the extension of this lease. And we signed it. And so when COVID came, to your point, we knew that even if we were able to survive, we were only going to be there for a couple, I think 18 more months anyway. But it helped with the retirement, because people would say to me, now's the time for you to enjoy your pension. Pension?
Yeah,
When that
right.
cash register stops, I don't have anything.
What pension?
What
I'm a restaurant
pension?
owner. I'm a restaurant owner. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe a big restaurant chain or something like that would have a pension system. But Peter, myself, and Tess, it's what we could put aside. We all had families to, college educated kids and everything like that. It's hard to put the money together.
And it's funny you say that, like, all hell broke loose, because I was, in a sense, on the other end, right? I was working for the Manhattan Times at the time, and also the Uptown Collective was doing social media. And it really did, like, it was one of those things that was viral. Like, everyone was up in arms. And it was an example, I think, of people power. Like, the neighborhood, said no. Like, as a group, it said no. We enough is enough. You could take everything, but don't take Cougans, right? Like, how did that feel for everyone to step up, like, in love of Cougans? How did that feel for you as the owner?
But we were mesmerized by it. We did not see this coming at all. We knew people would say, "Oh, it's terrible what they did," everything. But just going back to that real estate department, and we did meet at one time with Dr. Steve Corwin, who's the CEO of Presbyterian. He was very, very nice, and he told us, he says, we'll tell those people to make sure that it's a fair deal, fair to us, fair to you. But for 5 years, that's 60 months, that has been sitting vacant.
Yeah,
They weren't
I
getting
passed
it
by those.
built.
That's my next.
What
That
the
was
hell
my.
is
Yeah,
That was the next
and it's
thing.
just there. Yeah, it's just there. Yeah, it's horrible management. And
now-
the corner, the restaurant on the corner is gone too. So it's that whole little strip is just for
Yeah,
what?
and in a city that has a housing crisis, they emptied out, I think this September will be 10 years, that apartment building on 601 West 169th Street has been vacant.
Ridiculous.
This is a
Yeah.
city that needs all sorts of housing.
Mm-hmm.
As
And
we've been
don't
doing,
get me wrong.
as we've been doing this podcast, that issue of affordable housing has come up, and we have episodes coming up dealing with it. We did one episode already on affordable housing, but it's definitely when you see like an organization as wealthy as Presbyterian keeping an apartment building vacant because of what? It's infuriating to me. It's
Here's my
infuriating.
point. We all understand if they're going to do a big major construction project, they have to do it with a vacant space. We understand that. But if your insight is off by 10 years, you're just bad at what you do. They could have told those people, look, we can only give you short-term leases. We'll renew them until we need them, but we're going to have to get you out at some point in time. Know that. And I think there's 18 units there. There could have been 18 families living there for 10 years. I think now they're beginning to do some construction there. But it just took too long. And the real estate department did not have their fingers on the pulse of the neighborhood at all. And it took me a long time. I would talk to these politicians and I'd say, what does affordable housing mean? What would a 2-bedroom, 1-bath in Inwood be to be affordable? And they couldn't come up with a number. They have all these formulas and everything. I said, yeah, okay, fine, great. But what does that mean? And eventually I got a ballpark figure that a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment in Inwood would be considered affordable if it was $2,900 a month. That's not affordable. That's not affordable.
Affordable for who?
Yeah.
Right? That's crazy.
Yeah.
We paid a little bit higher than most restaurants to our staff, but a dishwasher was making $700 a week, right? $590 take home, $610 take home. How can you put?
Right. But speaking to that point, Dave, like, I speak to restaurant owners all the time. I have a lot of friends, right? They own restaurants, and the ones that do well is because they treat their employees right. And I think no one did that better than you guys, because those weren't employees; they were family.
100.
And you felt that when you went in there because every person was happy to be there, right? Like, and so why was that important? Why is that? It seemed like that was like a core value for Cougans.
Well, 100%, because both Peter and I worked our way through colleges by working in bars and restaurants. And uh, now retired for 5 years, looking back, I don't look back and take satisfaction that Led Black had a great hamburger on a Thursday night late. I look back on the fact that the person who served Led Black went on, got a college degree, and is doing something meaningful in their life. And I have to tell you, we had the greatest employees. This a couple of months ago, I get one of these Instagram things. One of our beloved workers who worked with us until about 2016, maybe. She got her PhD. She got her PhD.
That's awesome.
We have at least two people that I could, longtime employees who went into the police department and became detectives. Both Dominican, because I mentioned before that the biggest ethnic group in the New York City Police Department is no longer the Irish, it's the Dominicans.
It's Dominicans for
Yeah.
sure.
And that's a great career path. That's a great career path. So we're thrilled with the successes of the people who work for us, because I think they learned good work skills working for us.
I wanted to ask you. I wanted to say, hearing you talk about your former employees and the pride that you have that they've gotten ahead and gotten educated, and then also hearing you talk about the wages that your employees were making and your understanding of what's affordable for housing, and also just the fact that you've had your finger on the pulse of the people of the community and also the politicians. And so look, this is kind of touchy, but I wanted to talk about politics a little bit and the political situation right now, being that you've not only had impact on people's lives, but you've also been impacted by things like that. How do you see the current political situation, and what do you think is the way forward?
In a nutshell, the middle. The far left is not going to bring the majority together. The far right, hopefully, will not bring the majority together. It has to be, well, just for example, undocumented workers, right? How difficult would it be to say, if you've been in this country with documents or not documents for 3 years and you haven't done anything wrong, welcome.
Right.
Come up with some sort of formula. That has to be. I think the extreme left may have wonderful theoretical ideas, but they just may not be workable. And the far left and the far right has to be respectful of the concerns of the opposite side of the thing. So if someone on the left does not care at all about the borders, it's not going to work. Come up with some sort of compromise plan that works for everybody. My thing is right now is generational wealth. If your kids are going to be receiving, I don't know, a $2 million inheritance, if you're one of the top percent, then you're going to be passing on to your children $2 million. Maybe they could get by on $1.5 million, and you could put $500,000 into a fund to sort of straighten things, even the playing field a little bit.
Yeah,
I think we got to be fair with people, and too much is too much. Now, I don't make them bad guys, the people who made millions and millions of dollars, but you may have to share it a little bit more, and it may not be able to go all 100% to your kids who did nothing for it.
Yeah, I agree.
Warren
And
Buffett says the greatest line I've ever heard. He says, "I want my children to have so much money that they can do anything they want, but I don't want them to have so much money that they could do nothing." Isn't that
Very true.
great?
Love that. Love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, because we are kind of creating like princelings and kings and queens when they have all this inherited wealth that they didn't work for, right? And instead of helping out the country, for sure. I want to say, Dave, like we all miss Coogan's, and I know you miss it, but are you enjoying your retirement?
I'm loving my retirement. I'm loving my retirement.
So you don't want to be at Washington Heights working 12 hours anymore?
Well, when I go into Washington Heights, what I do is I take that little jitney across the George Washington Bridge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I try to walk where I've walked all the way up to Inwood. I've walked all the way down to 155th Street and back again. I get my steps in. I get to see the neighborhood. Sometimes, often on the street, they don't call me Dave. They call me Mr. Coogan. So,
Mr. Coogan.
still remember me.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Is there a place when you were here? Is there a place outside of Coogan that you like to frequent, food wise or bar wise?
While Coogan's was open,
Yeah, when you didn't want Coogan and you would step away, did you do that?
I got to tell you, no.
Really?
Yeah. Uh, I couldn't relax if I went out and I was close to the rest. If I came home to Jersey, my wife is a fabulous cook, and then I could sort of relax because it wouldn't be my responsibility. But if I was like next door at a place, I just
Then
had lunch
relax.
with our chef, Jose and Noah, who was fabulous with it. Myself and Tess just had lunch with him up on Casa Mafango on 207th Street. We just had
Yeah, I like that
nice
place.
lunch. Yeah.
Nice.
Very good. Very,
Very
very
good.
good. That was
Very
a
good. It's a
very
huge
enjoyable
space
meal.
too.
It's
Yes.
very large.
Yeah.
Do any of your of the politicians who might be with us still do any of them ever reach out to you and ask you, because your political views, the ones that I just heard right now, are so good, and I really feel like nowadays with people are so used to getting things like right when they want them. Like we just go to the app and we ask for something, and we go to the Amazon and we order it and it arrives at our doorstep. It's hard for people to wait. It's hard for people to compromise, but that's exactly what you're pushing. And I wonder, like, how can we get people to learn that skill?
Well, one of the things that happens is, and I accuse the left of it and I accuse the right of it, they completely negate the other people's concerns. What you have to do is recognize their concerns and come to some middle ground. Otherwise, nothing's going to go forward. This last presidential election, no secret, I did not vote for Donald Trump. But by the same token, my concerns were not addressed at all. We have a 30. I don't know enough about economics to know how this can be handled, but I know it's not a good idea that we owe $37 trillion. I know that's not a good idea. Someone come up with a plan to reduce it by something.
Yeah.
You know?
Dave, I mean, you're so right. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't stand Donald Trump. Still can't. I abhor him. I see him. I throw things at the TV if I see him. But you're right. The Democrats and Biden, it was just, we're not Trump, and that's not enough. You know what I mean? And they were so out of touch. Yeah. So I think that advice. You should be president, Dave.
Environment. I have 7 grandkids.
Right.
A lot of trouble. Anybody who doesn't think that we have to start planning for climate change, my God,
Yeah. So true. Like it's like.
Plan.
Dave, if you want to start a podcast, you should talk to me and Led, and we'll help you to do your podcast as well. You're very retired. I love it.
No, but that kind of comments.
Politicians, I see Adriano fairly regularly. I see Mark Levine, who I'm very friendly with. I know Mark for a long time, since he was in Teach for America, which I think is 30 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't even know he was.
He's running for comptroller, right?
Yes.
I think Mark Levine, it has a mayorship in his future. I think. I don't know.
I can see that. I like and admire him very much.
Likewise.
Well, look.
Of course, Benny Farrell's family is still my family. His 3 children, and I are in a lot of communication. My time in Washington, I really became, you know, Inwood regarded itself as a separate neighborhood. Washington Heights sort of thought Inwood was the northern part of Washington Heights. That's it, right? That's a big divide, right? Inwood was fierce, man.
It's still a controversy.
Yeah. No, it's so true. As a Dominican growing up in Washington Heights, I did not see Inwood as a separate thing. It was just down the hill from where I lived. You know, it was just part of my neighborhood. But it's interesting because that sliver of Inwood that's you know, west of Broadway from Dykeman to 215, that to me is Inwood, right? The other stuff is, you know, I always joke that there's a Inwood part of Washington Heights and the Washington Heights part of Inwood.
Were you a psychologist? I think you had that right on the. I think you hit the nail on the head.
That's a perfect description. Perfect description.
But, you know, Dave, we want to say thank you so much for being on this podcast. I think we're going to do a part 2. You know, we want to have John Michaud and Glenn Austin Anderson, you know, have their take on it. But this has been so incredible, man. Yeah. Any parting words you want to tell to the people? Anything you want to say?
Well, like I said, I think most people thought we were the leftover Irish that were in Washington Heights that never left, and that wasn't true. But when the Dominican community, the Washington Heights community, but I mean, to a large degree, that was the Dominican community, kind of welcomed us with open arms. And I think it was Guillermo Linares said that Dave and Pete were actually Dominican, but they think they're Irish.
For sure. You guys were honorary Dominicans, Dominicans, man, for sure.
Yeah, and I always felt like an honorary Irish person. So I love that. And I just love that we can share our cultures with each other and our thoughts. And I'm so happy that you joined us today. This has been such an amazing discussion and conversation. I love that you're with us. So thank you so much, and enjoy your retirement.
Enjoy your retirement. Like, we miss Cougans, but we're happy that you're happily retired.
Exactly.
So thank you so much, Dave. Thank you, brother.
Thanks for joining us in this episode of Uptown Voices, brought to you by 181 Cabrini, your neighborhood bistro just steps away from the North Walk of the George Washington Bridge. Use the code Uptown Voices Season 1 for your discount. And to stay up to date on the latest in Uptown, you can follow Uptown Collective on Instagram, Facebook, and X. If you're watching Uptown Voices on YouTube, don't forget to smash the subscribe button and to give us a like. We also need financial contributions from listeners like you to produce, improve, and expand our content. To contribute, please scan the QR code on the screen or visit www.liveinamericana.com. That's www.liveinamericana.com. Until next time, this has been Uptown Voices.